Everybody, Dan Holstein here, helping your business take flight. And I'm really excited today to have Sarah Milton, who is a financial educator and author. And today we're going to be talking about money mindset and some of the challenges that people run into in terms of attracting wealth and some of the key strategies that we all can implement to make sure that we can attract more wealth into our lives. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks. So just give us a little background. How did you get into the financial education role?
Well, I started out as a financial advisor with Freedom 55 about 10 years ago now. And I worked with them for a while. And while I was working for them, I also had an opportunity to start writing for a finance blog called retirehappy.ca.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up working with the gentleman who owned the blog. So now I work as a financial education specialist, and my job is to get people excited about money and help them with strategies for earning, growing, and investing their money.
That's fantastic. So it's something you said there just stood out for me. So getting people excited about money. Do you find that some people aren't? And is that one of the challenges that they may have around attracting wealth into their lives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in the financial services industry, we do too good of a job of making you feel like you need a master's in math and a degree in business in order to manage your money. And it's really not true. And for me, I find that what you focus on expands. And so you tend to focus on the things you're excited about. But for a lot of people, they associate money with things that maybe they're not particularly excited about. You know, they focus on the math part of it or the investment part of it. They tend to push it aside because they don't feel comfortable handling it. And so I feel that by getting people excited about money, you're encouraging them to pay attention to it, and what you pay attention to grows. And if you're growing your money, that's a good thing.
That's absolutely a good thing. And you know, if people think something is difficult, often they may avoid it even to their own detriment. So what are some of the beliefs that people have around money that you find that makes them think it's growing their wealth is difficult?
People tend to think that money is equivalent to math. So they feel like if they're not very good at math or they didn't enjoy math, then they're naturally not very good at money. People also have the misconception that you're either good or bad with money. Money is a skill, just like anything else. You know, if I want to be good at cooking, then I need to spend some time with recipes and practicing and learning the different skills in order to be a decent cook. It's not something, well, not for me anyway, it's not something that comes naturally. And money is no different, but we don't teach money in school. We don't give kids in college strategies for managing the credit cards they get in their fresh bags. You know, so it's not really surprising that people run into challenges with money, and they tend to blame themselves and assume that they're just bad at it. And really, it's just that they've never had an opportunity to learn the skills they need to manage it effectively.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If it's they're looking at it in a binary way, like being good or bad, and then identify with one or the other, that's kind of closing the door, isn't it? Saying, oh, well, I'm not good with math, so I'm not going to be good with money. Where do you think some of these beliefs come from? I mean, when we're born, we're little babies, we know nothing about money. It's just a construct that we're taught, right, by our parents, caregivers. And where do you think that comes from, that people would end up believing negative things about money for themselves?
There's a theory that says that everything we've ever heard, seen, and experienced in relationship to money influences our ability to earn, hold, and grow it. So as young people, we tend to absorb the beliefs of the people around us. And that's true for money, and it's true for other aspects of life as well. So if you grow up in a household where money is a source of argument or a source of challenge, then it's not really a big stretch to think that you're going to associate it more on the negative side than the positive side. Whereas if you grow up in a home where money is openly discussed and, you know, strategies are shared for managing money, if it's seen more as a positive thing, then you may have a different mindset towards it. So there's a lot of psychology in money that people don't always pay attention to.
That makes a lot of sense, Sarah. And I think something on that too, as we're growing up, there's a point in our lives where we're incredibly impressionable. And as a dependent on our caregivers, our parents, you know, we have to believe what we see as truth, right? So if we're seeing that arguing, whatnot over money, then getting that negative connotation, we're not going to want to pursue that for ourselves, are we? Like, it's just going to bring back up feelings of challenge and discord.
Right. Absolutely. Like, I grew up in a household where both my parents are really good with money, but they were also born in the 1930s in a generation that wasn't talking about money. Like, it was rude to talk about money. So I grew up hearing messaging about, don't borrow, don't lend, like save, but I never had the theory behind it. So, I thought we were poor growing up because we shopped in secondhand stores and we had secondhand furniture. My parents were just smart. They knew they had 3 kids who would destroy things. So they didn't buy the good furniture and the nice kitchen until we were all out of the house. But
you're like, hey, what are you doing?
I know, as a teenager growing up, you're like, why do we have this old furniture? They were smart, but I didn't really understand that my dad actually really had the money thing down, probably until I was in my 20s or 30s. And it's like, okay, yeah, now I understand what he was talking about. But
then it all made sense, but you didn't have the backstory, so you didn't have the context. And
No.
it's interesting because based on what you just said, like, your parents may not have looked wealthy, but it sounds like they were being really frugal, which was important, etc. And that 30s mentality growing up through the Depression, I think that really left an impression on people about scarcity. So it sounds like they did a great job, and they didn't feel the need to look wealthy. And I think that's one of the other things that sometimes people get confused about. They see someone that looks wealthy and they think that's what wealth is, the fancy car, big watch, all that kind of stuff. But that's not necessarily true, is it?
No, I think most of the people that I met as a financial advisor who had a significant amount of money built up, very rarely would you have known that, they didn't look like your stereotypical rich person. They didn't live in a particularly wealthy neighborhood. They didn't drive particularly fancy cars. They didn't have particularly, prestigious jobs that you would necessarily associate with people having wealth. But over time, they followed good principles and they built up a decent amount of money. And by not having that extravagant lifestyle, it actually makes it easier for you to build wealth because your expenses are lower.
That makes sense.
And we live in a society where it's very easy to finance everything now. So, back in the 1940s, when my parents were growing up, if you lived in a big house and you had a car, then you had to have money because the only way to get those things was to have money in the bank. But nowadays, you just need to have a decent income and a good credit score, and you can live in a massive house and drive multiple vehicles, but you're going to have a lot of payments, but you may not necessarily have any money in the bank.
It's looking wealthy, not being wealthier. It's being on that treadmill. And do you see challenges in terms of, we're such an instant gratification society these days, and with social media and just media in general, always showing something aspirational, almost making people feel you're not enough unless you have this car, or you're not enough unless you have this brand of whatever the item is. Do you think there's a lot of pressure on young people and people in general based on everything that's coming from the media to encouraging them that they need to have certain things?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to it. There's we're being presented with a lot of things that we can have or that we should want or that we should need, and our human brain is just naturally, as soon as you see something, you get just as excited about the potential of something as you do about actually owning it. And we're being marketed very heavily with things. They did some research with gamblers where they put them in MRI machines and they played like those spinning wheels in front of them where you get the 777. And they found that the brain responded just as powerfully to the anticipation of that third 7 as it did to actually getting 3 7s in a row. And so we see this a lot of times with retail. If you walk into a retail store, most people, when they walk into a retail store, go right. And so where's all the new merchandise in the store? Along the front on the right hand side of the store. Where's all the sales stuff? At the back. So you have to walk past all the new good stuff in order to get to the back stuff. Like, we are being marketed to through the whole retail experience, and we don't necessarily realize. And so we walk in the store and you see that new shirt and you start thinking about how cute the shirt is going to look. And it's the anticipation of having it that grabs you. You may buy it, but 6 months later, it's probably still in the back of your closet with the tags on, right? But all they want is the sale.
Yeah, it's the psychology is amazing. And, they say that, when there's something that we want, like a goal, it's not the thing we want, it's how we're going to feel about it that we're actually
Mhm.
after. And so I think that's probably why some of that anticipation kicks in and they're taking advantage of that. So that
Yeah.
again, so we're talking about some of the psychology
Mhm.
of money. So what are some of the things that we need to do or may need to think about as we're engaging with wealth development and things like that, that are some of the most important things to bear in mind? What are some of those thoughts that are really going to help us move forward with our wealth creation?
Um, well, I would say as a foundation, the idea that everybody has a money blueprint.
Hmm.
T. Harv Eker wrote a book called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, which I would say is probably the one book that literally changed my life. And he talks about some research in there and this idea of the money blueprint, where everybody has a money personality. So people tend to fall into one of four camps. You might be a spender, you might be a saver, you might be an avoider, or you might be a money monk, somebody who doesn't feel right about having money when other people don't. So your money personality influences how you interact with money. And then we have a money thermostat. So a point where we're comfortable, a certain amount of money that we're comfortable having in our bank accounts, in our investment accounts, in our savings accounts. When we have less than that amount, we tend to rein ourselves in until we've built ourselves back up. When we have more, we tend to spend ourselves down until we're back.
As opposed to doing something
So,
to lift the thermostat to get
mhm,
comfortable with the new level. That's
exactly.
that whole
So,
thing with lottery winners that very often they're back down below where they were 2 3
mhm,
years later after winning a lottery because that thermostat is set low, not for the millions, it's set for
exactly.
the where they were.
Yeah.
Can you just take us through really quick the four blueprints?
Yeah. So the four money personalities
Yeah,
there.
that's right.
Yeah, that's okay. So we start out with the spenders. So spenders love to spend, sometimes on themselves, sometimes on other people. A bad place for a spender to be is always in a mall, because there's lots of things that they could spend. And it's important as I'm going through these, I always tell people, it's not that any of these personalities are good or bad. um, there's say that there's four phases to change. So the first phase is awareness that there is a money personality. The second phase is understanding. So understanding how your money personality impacts the way that you manage your money. And then you can put in place action steps that take you to the results that you need. So when I share the information about the personalities, it's not that everybody should be a saver versus a spender. It's just about awareness. So spenders love to save. They often have challenges with credit cards and lines of credit because often the desire to spend overrides the amount of actual cash that they have in their bank account, makes it
Hmm.
hard often for saving. Savers are the opposite. They love to save. And you would think that the saver was the ideal money personality, but savers have their own challenges. A lot of savers have trouble spending money on things that they actually need. Like they'll walk versus take the bus, or they'll take the bus versus own a car. They also have a challenge when it comes to investing. Savers get very uncomfortable putting their money into mutual funds or other investments. And so they often have large amounts of money sitting in cash, making very small amounts of interest.
That's that
They
fear.
also have challenges. Yeah, exactly. It's that fear they want to protect what they've built. And they also have challenges in retirement because they've spent literally decades building up all of this money, and now they have to start drawing down on it. And that can be very challenging for them. Avoider is my money personality. So avoiders literally just, they don't enjoy dealing with money. And I understand as a financial educator and, and a financial advisor that this may seem like a strange money personality, but again, it's about awareness. I know that, looking at my money, looking after my money is not my favorite thing to do. So I automate everything. I have all of my savings automated. I have all of my investments automated. Like I have everything set up so that I have to pay as little attention as possible to the day-to-day aspects of managing my money, because it takes I tend to procrastinate pretty hard on doing that.
Gotcha. But
That
you've
doesn't
structured
help me get
yourself to
where I need to be.
gotcha. So you've identified that, let's call it weakness or style, and you
Yeah.
realize it may not be the best. So you've actually put some structure in place to kind of
Hmm.
support you through that. Okay.
Yeah,
Tell us about the money
exactly.
monk. This is an interesting
The
one.
money monk is the rarest personality. So in a room of 100 people, I would usually only expect to find 2 or 3 money monks, maybe. These are people who just don't feel right about having money when other people don't. So they have a hard time putting aside money for themselves when there are family members who they feel might need it more, or charities or organizations they feel might need it more. And so, it can be hard for them, but it's often that airplane analogy. If you're in an airplane and the oxygen mask comes down, you have to put on your own oxygen mask before you can help other people.
Yeah.
And it's the same when it comes to money. Building yourself financial security is not selfish. Like, you're actually putting yourself in a position where you can be more useful to other people if you have that financial stability and security to be able to offer help down the road.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that probably all of these personalities, again, come back from what people have experienced growing up, right? And that's where they kind of got that style from. So, okay, so that's really interesting. So what are some of the key things that we need to bear in mind as we're looking to develop our wealth? What are your top strategies to be able to move that forward?
I always like to say that managing money isn't rocket science, it's pocket science. So it comes down to some very simple strategies. Just because they're simple doesn't mean they're easy. And I recognize that for some people, hearing that word wealth is going to be a little bit of a trigger, because people may have some negative associations with wealth, not because they don't want to have money, but because they attach it to a certain kind of person or a certain kind of lifestyle or a certain kind of behavior that doesn't feel like them. And so
it's that if they attract wealth,
just to sip that a little. Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry for over talking there. I had a little delay.
No, that's okay.
It sounds like they're perceiving a wealthy person as being something that they don't want to be like. Is that what you're getting at? And so that if they don't want to be like this, well, insert negative adjective, greedy or whatever, if that's what they're associating with, so they don't want to become that, so they avoid dealing or avoid building their own wealth because it's like work to become something they don't want to become.
Yeah, exactly. If you think that money is difficult and complicated and you think rich people are arrogant idiots, then it's not a big stretch to think that you're not going to put a lot of time and energy into something that's difficult and complicated, and you're not going to work your butt off to become an arrogant idiot. So part of my own money journey was just thinking, I never had a driving desire for stuff, right? I never had a big desire to have a fancy house or, take these crazy vacations or have a lot of stuff. I like cars. So yes, the idea of having a nice car is definitely a motivator for me, but all of the other stuff, really not so much. And then somebody said to me, but you can do way more good in the world if you have money than if you don't. And that was my light bulb moment. That was kind of that trick that went, oh, well, that's a reason for building wealth I can get behind. Like, I can get behind the idea of building wealth so that I can, help my family, so that I can help my friends, so that I can invest in charities that I believe in, so that I can have time freedom where I don't have to work, but I can take time off to volunteer or spend time with the people that matter to me. So that became my why. That became my driver. It's never been about the stuff for me. For other people, it may be about the stuff, right? And that's fine too. Everybody's got to have their own motivator. But those money beliefs can really sabotage you in ways that you're not always totally aware of. That's for sure.
I think what you, excuse me, sorry. I think what you just mentioned about having a why is really important, right? Because if there's anything that we need to do that we may perceive as a little bit difficult, even if there's a logical benefit to doing it, we may still avoid doing it. But when we have ourselves tied into an emotional reason, that's really what can get us moving, right? So like you said about being able to support others, that's more motivating than getting yourself some more stuff, right? So I think that's a great example. What's your kind of top money belief that you'd share with folks? The top thing that they, if they believed it to be true, that they would be on the path to creating wealth for themselves more easily?
I would say that you deserve to have as much money as you need. And so there's a feeling of deserving, a feeling of value, and people can take that and apply it to their own situation. So, however much money you need may be just enough for your day to day, or it may be a large amount of money for a legacy, right? Or for philanthropy. So you deserve to have it, and you can have it. Often it's ourselves that get in the way. There's no finite amount of money for people to have. We see that all the time, that, we have an increasing number of millionaires and billionaires. And sometimes people feel like we have an increasing amount of poverty in response to that. But I don't think the two things are necessarily intertwined. We need more people to be building more wealth, to spread that wealth among our community and our society. Like we can do far more good in the world if we have money than if we don't.
Well,
So,
absolutely. It's a resource, right? It's a resource that we can use
mhm.
as fuel, as a tool to do good, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And managing money doesn't have to be difficult and complicated. My industry likes to make you think that it is, but it really doesn't. I talk about managing money being pocket science rather than rocket science. And it really does come down to some very simple principles. If you want to get started in just building a framework for yourself, that the easiest way to do it is to take a piece of paper, draw a line right down the middle, and on the left-hand side, write down all of the money that you have coming in during the month. And then on the right-hand side, write down all of the things that you have going out during the month. And then you subtract the two numbers. And if the answer is negative, then there's some cutting or adjusting that needs to be done on that right side of the page. And if the number is positive, then you need to give a purpose to those extra dollars. Like every dollar you have needs to have a purpose. If you don't give it a purpose, it will go find one of its own. It will go work for your favorite retail store. It will go work for your credit cards. It will go work for your friends, for your family. Like money needs to work. And if it's your money, you should be the one that's telling it where it needs to go and who it needs to work for.
I think that's a great message for us to wrap up on there, Sarah, that you deserve the wealth that you want and need, and to be intentional, give every dollar a purpose. And I think that that's really smart, because that doesn't leave any dollars scurrying for the corners, right? Like when you're allocating it and it's going somewhere important, and you're on the path. So, well, this has been great. Thanks so much for dropping in and for sharing your insights. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome.
Okay, we'll catch you next time. Thanks, Sarah.